Hello everyone, and welcome to the second Lithmeria Building promo, which will cover mobs and AIs. My name is Dimitri, or if you prefer, Alvalan, and this video will cover the basics of designing a mob, giving it an AI, and thus teaching it to fight. If you missed our first video, we constructed a couple of rooms and covered all the possibilities of room building with the Lithmerian builder. If you look above the welcome, you'll see a small map. I've just added a couple of swamp rooms around our original small hut in the wilderness. They're very generic sort of swamps that, again, if I were building this area for real, I would be using unique descriptions and ambiences and all sorts of fancy things like that. But for a demonstration, they'll do. Now, the basic idea for the tiny little demonstration area that I'm creating is a small hut in the swamp surrounded by savages who constantly try to wander around and stab anything living that's inside it. To this end, let's go have a look at our savages. Here we have a brutal savage. Hello. That's just a demonstration of events I thought I'd throw up there as a teaser for the next episode. But now let's have a look at the mob himself. If we hit an info here and here, we see his number. Let's have a look at all the things we can see with him. There's his name, she's just very basic, savage. Here's his short description, which is used in things like his attacks and the info here list you saw above. There's his multiples, which is what sort of it looks like when there are two brutal savages in the room. A comment I can leave for myself, other builders or coders. The references, these are ways you can interact with the mob, sort of command words it'll recognize, just so you're not sitting there with an alligator chewing your leg off, trying to work out whether, it can be targeted by a crocodile, alligator, or whatever. The type and loyalty, type is used for some mechanical things. Loyalty is if you want to make it loyal to a particular faction, like Teladira or Aspalaria, or maybe, one of the necromancer cults in the Rondon foothills. How much experience it's worth, what level it is, how much gold it's worth, what the chances are on its death that it'll drop that gold, how much health and mana he has. Now all that information is contained in a help file. I've just sort of plugged it in because I know what it is. AIs and variants are something we'll cover a little bit later. Sentience is a drop-down menu that lets you pick what kind of mob it is. This determines some of its behavior, for example whether it'll heal itself, whether it'll use long-term flask, that sort of thing, or whether it'll just sort of tank you and die. And these are the items it wields. Because I'm going to be using a player AI, I can give it player items. Scrolling down, we have the room description, what it looks like when you just walk into a room and see it. The long description, when you look at it. The dead description, what it looks like when it's dead. And if you notice, we have this wildcard called H here. Now that determines how the mob was slain. So for example, if I were a caller, a flame caller, which is the Teladiri sort of big splashy spell mage, and I fought this savage and I killed him with some fire attacks, then anyone who walked into the room and saw this would see something along the lines of, slain in the prime of his life, this brutal savage has been burned to a crisp. That helps make it make the world a little bit more sort of unique and interesting, and make it so that not all corpses are the same. You can see the signs of dismemberment, which is quite exciting. And we've used it again here for the long dead description, which is what the savage will look like when you, if he's dead and you sort of look at his body. Then there are the enter and exit messages, which again, very, very generic. You'd see them in any MUD, with the wildcard at D. Then there are the flags. You can toggle male, female, whether it's aggro, and will attack anyone who enters, unless they're loyal to him. Then there's whether it'll team up with other mobs, whether it's invincible, which isn't a flag we use much, but it's there in case we want to, for example, quest givers in novice areas, that sort of thing, if we want to make them invincible. Whether when it kills you, if it'll take something off your body, or whether if there's stuff lying around, it'll try to nab it. Whether it'll chase you about if you run away from it. Whether it'll wander. And then for chase and wander, there's these confines, whether it's confined to a zone, an environment. For example, we could make a swamp hag that refuses to leave the swamp, so it'll just wander around the little swamp area without ever going into, say, onto a road. Then there's indoor confined, which again, if the mob starts indoor or outdoor, it'll either not go inside or it won't come outside, depending on whether it starts when you toggle that. Whether you can follow the mob, which we use for some quests, and whether the mob's corpse is gettable. Most mob corpses won't be, because we want to avoid the sort of suspension of disbelief where you've got a 160-pound human carrying 4,000 pounds of ogres. But some quests you will pick up bodies, and that's what it's for. Then there are the additional categories. Events we'll be covering in the weeks to come, but resists and resets are ones we'll take a look at now. If we hit resists, my mistake. We can see that the sort of same MV menu comes up, but with the resists menu here. This lets you set how resistant or vulnerable a mob is to every single one of these forms of types of damage. Again, an ice elemental might be very resistant to ice, but very vulnerable to, say, fire. And you can play around with that. The blunt and smashing damage and slashing damage, we can toggle that, but because this is going to be a humanoid mob wearing armor, I'm not going to touch it. Now if we look at resets, we see that the mob has a reset time of 15 minutes, and it'll reset in room 1086. I can add more rooms to that, and then it'll reset randomly in any of those rooms every time it dies, and 15 minutes after it dies. And again, you have full control over that. And in case you missed the room building demonstration, absolutely everything here can be toggled by clicking on it and then setting a new value using MXP. So if I set the experience to 430, we see that it's changed to 430. It's very easy, just point and click on absolutely everything. So to change them to a female, change them back to a male. So